The day Sheriff Marcus Reed ordered his canine to attack Ruth Coleman was the day Haven Ridge, Georgia's carefully guarded secrets, began to unravel. For 12 years, this 75-year-old black woman had lived quietly on the town's outskirts, tending a vibrant carnation garden alongside her loyal dog, Titan. The police believed their highly trained canine would subdue her. Instead, it stopped in its tracks, bowed its head before Ruth, as if obeying a command far stronger than any handler's instruction. That moment, captured on a neighborhood child's phone, sent shockwaves through the community. No one realized they were witnessing the opening move in a dangerous battle. Ruth was not just an ordinary elder. She was Captain Coleman, former commander of an anti-terrorism K-9 unit, keeper of proof exposing a horrific crime. Could an aging woman and her devoted dog topple the powerful forces determined to silence them? All right, my dear viewers, get ready for a story that will leave you speechless. Take a second to like the video and subscribe, only if you truly feel the impact of what I'm sharing here. And drop a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always thrilling to see friends joining us from all corners of the globe. Haven Ridge. The name drifts like a soft autumn song. It's a small town nestled quietly in the heart of Georgia. To outsiders, it appears so peaceful that time itself seems to slow down, lest it disturb a single falling leaf. Yet beneath that calm facade lie whispered rumors, furtive glances, stories never fully told. On the town's edge stands an old wooden house, neither beautiful nor grand, but as unassuming as its owner. Ruth Coleman lives there. Each morning she faithfully waters the little garden at her doorstep, where carnations bloom in tight clusters beside neat rows of vegetables. Her thin, weathered hands tend each leaf as if every stem carries an ancient memory. No one knows exactly where she came from. Only that 12 years ago, one day, Ruth quietly appeared, bought the land, and lived alone. No relatives, no friends, no comings, no goings. The children call her a witch, not in fear, but in curiosity. The adults speak less, yet their eyes betray hesitation whenever Ruth's name surfaces. She never strikes up conversation, never attends church, never joins the town's festivities. She has only Titan, a large coal-black dog with eyes as deep as they are piercing. Titan never leaves her side. But that silence couldn't last forever. Victor Hayes, a man in an expensive suit with a smile that never reaches his eyes, set his sights on Ruth's land. As a real estate developer, he was accustomed to wielding money and power like weapons. When his luxury resort plans were unveiled, everyone knew Ruth would be the final obstacle. He visited her. He spoke in flowery terms. He offered a handsome sum. Ruth simply shook her head. Her eyes held no anger, only a serenity that irritated Hayes. He was unused to rejection, let alone from an unnamed old woman. Then came Sheriff Marcus Reed, Hayes's high school friend, who required no persuasion, only intimidation. One gray morning, Marcus arrived at Ruth's door with his son, Nathan Reed, a rookie officer, and a canine dog in tow. They carried a flimsy charge, disturbing the peace. Ruth opened the door, her gaze unmoved by fear. Titan stood alert, ears pricked, yet silent. Marcus gave the signal. The young officer hesitated but obeyed. The K-9, a meticulously trained animal, snarled, poised to strike. For a moment, time itself seemed to freeze. Then the unthinkable happened. The K-9 halted in mid-leap. It neither barked nor attacked. Instead, it bowed its head, slowly, as if offering a salute. Then, it wagged its tail. a gentle, welcoming wave, as though greeting a long-lost friend. Ruth did nothing. She simply watched the dog, her eyes revealing a hidden sorrow, asleep for years. Nathan stood speechless. Marcus flushed with embarrassment. He barked harsher commands. The dog ignored them. It walked to Ruth. It sat at her feet. It lifted its head to look at her. Silence. Peace. Unbeknownst to all, a neighborhood boy was filming the entire scene on his phone. Mere seconds of footage that night would soon rock the town to its core. Under the dim neon glow of late-night diners, the people of Haven Ridge watched the clip on repeat. None could explain it. A K-9, trained by the sheriff's department, acting as though Ruth were its true handler. Some whispered of witchcraft. Others claimed she tamed the dog with her eyes, but many began to ask, who is she? From that day on, Ruth never left her home. Titan remained on the front step. Yet something had undeniably shifted. The neighbors' gazes were no longer merely curious, but unsettled. It felt as though the entire town waited for an answer, not from Ruth, but from themselves. What was real, and what had they overlooked for 12 years? Ruth remained silent in her old wooden house. She offered no justification, no explanation. She never tried to clarify. For sometimes the truth need not be spoken. It only needs to be felt, like a gaze exchanged between two beings who seem unrelated, yet recognize each other in an instant. A moment when a guard dog set aside its instinct, just to bow before an ancient soul. Behind the weathered wooden door of Ruth Coleman's humble home lies a world no one could have imagined. Not the whispered witchcraft or strange magic children claimed, but a past locked away and sealed by wounds that never healed. In that room, entered only by Ruth herself, faded photographs hang on the walls, and rows of dusty bronze and silver medals rest on shelves. They are not mere decorations, but fragments of a life once honored nationwide. Captain Ruth Coleman. No one in Haven Ridge knew that the solitary woman was the first black commander to lead a U.S. Army anti-terrorism K-9 unit. Once, she strode across the barracks floor in crisp uniform, her footsteps sharp as steel. She was more than a soldier. She symbolized discipline, courage, and unwavering loyalty to what was right. In 2002, during a top-secret mission in Iraq, Ruth's unit uncovered a confidential dossier. Its torn edges still smelled faintly of gunpowder, and it bore the ominous name Project Nightshade, an illicit biological weapons program tested on American soldiers, overseen by then Lieutenant Colonel Victor Hayes. The moment Ruth filed her report, the justice she believed in turned its back. Instead of praise for bravery, she was summoned and branded insubordinate, accused of undermining unit morale. No trial, no investigation, just a forced retirement and a wiped clean record, as though she had never existed. Ruth did not protest. She simply vanished. She chose that plot of land in Haven Ridge for her remaining years, not for peace, but because there she discovered Nightshade's final proof: buried containers of biological agents concealed beneath the earth. She bought the land. She built a house, and she devoted her life to guarding a secret she knew would one day see the light. While that past lay quietly buried, someone began to sense something amiss. Claire Bennett, a young veterinary lab technician at the local clinic. One day, Titan, Ruth's companion dog, was brought in for treatment. Claire noted something uncanny. Its reflexes, its bearing, its muscles, all those of a highly trained warrior, not a pet. Claire couldn't dismiss her curiosity. especially after witnessing Ruth signal Titan with intricate hand gestures. They were no random motions, but precise military commands down to every joint. Claire was young, but not naive. She recognized what she saw, and knew it came from a woman far from ordinary. Claire shared her suspicions with her boyfriend, Nathan Reed, son of Sheriff Marcus Reed. Nathan had watched his father press vague charges against Ruth, yet when the very K-9 of the sheriff's department refused to attack and instead sat obediently before her, Nathan's heart wavered. Deep inside, he sensed something profoundly wrong. Torn between loyalty to his father and the call of truth, Nathan remained silent. But the video of the K-9 obeying Ruth spread like wildfire. The town buzzed with questions. Why would a rigorously trained police dog bow its head to an elderly woman with no power, no authority? Claire and Nathan realized they could not wait any longer. They began covertly gathering old files, forgotten data, and bit by bit, the secret web behind Ruth Coleman's life began to unravel. But truth is not welcomed in a world spun by self-interest and conspiracy. The deeper they delved, the more danger closed in, and those who once sought to bury Project Nightshade would stop at nothing to ensure the past remained dead. Ruth understood this. Perhaps she had always been ready for this moment, yet she was no longer alone. For once the flame of justice ignites, even a single ember can spark a roaring blaze. And this time, Ruth would no longer stay silent. This time, the truth would be called by its true name. When trust finally found fertile ground to take root, Ruth began to open her heart. Not out of loneliness, not out of despair, but because Claire's earnest gaze and Nathan's hesitant yet resolute silence reminded her of something she thought long forgotten: the presence of comrades. Ruth told them of the past she had buried for so many years, the missions, the truths twisted beyond recognition, and why she could never leave that land. She spoke of Project Nightshade, of what she and her team uncovered back then, a biological toxin tested on the very soldiers they called brothers in arms. She spoke of betrayal by her superiors, of the forced retirement order, and of the records destroyed in silence. She did not regret choosing truth, but the pain of being erased from history still echoed in every breath. Ruth did not fight alone. There was one who stood by her, though from the shadows, Colonel Isaiah Powell. He could not publicly defend her, yet he remained her final safeguard, the one she could call when the time came. And that time had come. Ruth reached out to Isaiah. One call, no lengthy explanations, no need for words. They understood each other through the silent bond forged in the crucible of combat. Before long, a lawyer appeared. No name, no business card, but armed with a bail order when Ruth was arrested again, this time accused of obstructing justice. Claire and Nathan watched with heavy hearts. Ruth offered no resistance, yet her eyes no longer yielded. They gleamed with something resolute, as if she had foreseen this moment. Amidst the confusion, Claire pressed on, following every remaining clue. One long night, rifling through Ruth's old files, she discovered a faded print of a scientific paper authored by R. Coleman. Its contents warned of the long-term effects of a biological compound coded NX-17, the very substance used in Project Nightshade. The paper had never been published. A scrawled note at the bottom read, "Rejected by the Military Medical Board, August 2003. Meanwhile, driven by uneasy intuition, Nathan secretly accessed his father's computer. He uncovered a series of emails between Marcus Reed and Victor Hayes. There could be no doubt now, it was all a setup. The sheriff, charged with upholding justice, had been covertly colluding to seize Ruth's land. They planned an emergency excavation to destroy the buried containers before the truth could surface. Unable to wait any longer, Claire and Nathan, under the silent protection of the mysterious lawyer, sprang into action with Ruth. Titan, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, led them to a hidden corner of the garden. Under seemingly innocent soil, an old iron hatch emerged. No lock, no markings. But anyone who entered knew this place had never been forgotten. It was merely waiting to be reopened. Inside, flashlight beams revealed sealed metal crates, yellowed folders of paperwork, audio recordings of the experiments, and vials of NX-17 stored in airtight tubes. Claire's hand shook as she opened a case containing medical records, the roster of affected soldiers. These were more than statistics. They were people, names of those who once dreamed, once fought, once trusted their commanders, only to be turned into test subjects. But they had no time to linger. Hayes wasted no time. He hired Blackthorne, a private security firm infamous for operating beyond the bounds of law. Men in professional attire began to lurk around Haven Ridge, not overtly, not loudly, but silently observing, filming, making anyone who approached Ruth uneasy. One night, Claire received an anonymous email. No subject, no message, just an attachment. She opened it to find dozens of medical records, extracted from the military system, documenting neurological damage, bone marrow failure, and genetic defects in soldiers deployed in 2002, all sharing a singular anomaly, exposure to NX-17. No more doubt. The evidence was glaring, undeniable. Ruth's story spread. The old video of the K-9 bowing to her resurfaced. The media descended on Haven Ridge. The community fractured. Some rallied behind Ruth, calling her the guardian of justice's memory, while others remained fearful, believing she was a threat, a part of the past that should stay buried. But Ruth needed no chorus of supporters. She needed only one thing, the truth to be revealed. And she had come too far to stop now. This was no longer about defense. It was time to confront. Amid suspicious glances and ever-tightening footsteps closing in on her, Ruth stood tall. Her eyes no longer fled. They no longer trembled. Only one promise remained. To the souls who fell for truth's sake. And she had never forgotten. Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or sip some water, then stay tuned for the next astonishing twist, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see friends joining us from around the globe. Comment 1. If you find this story compelling, so we can continue bringing you more incredible tales. Hayes had lost his patience. When every scheme to manipulate public opinion and bury the truth failed against Ruth's quiet persistence, he chose his final weapon: violence. That night, he ordered Blackthorne, an anonymous, lawless mercenary group, to launch simultaneous attacks on two targets: Ruth's home and the Haven Ridge police station. His mission was clear: eradicate every shred of evidence and silence every witness. At the station, Nathan and his father, Marcus Reed, fought to protect the files they knew were forged. But those stacks of paper might now be the keystone to unraveling an entire conspiracy. Marcus, who once turned a blind eye to the truth, now stood at the crossroads between redemption and collapse. Inside him raged a turmoil, no longer merely an officer obeying Hayes, but a father beginning to grasp the horrifying reality he had helped conceal. A thunderous crash shattered the tense air. An armed squad burst in. No warning, no negotiation. They knew precisely what to find and whom to target. In the chaos, Nathan recognized a familiar face, K-9 Officer Derek Walsh. The way Walsh strode forward, his unwavering stare as he ripped open the filing cabinet. It was not the conduct of a protector of justice. Nathan cried out, lunging to stop him, but Walsh was prepared. His gun slid from its holster like lightning. Before a shot could ring out, another echoed first. Marcus, bleeding through his uniform, had fired. Without hesitation, he tackled Walsh to the floor, pinning him with every ounce of regret from years of wrong choices. He took a bullet for it, but his eyes no longer dodged. He had made his choice. This time, he stood with the truth. At Ruth's house, she faced the onslaught with equal resolve. When gunfire erupted in the distance, she was ready. At her side stood Titan, loyal, vigilant, and a band of former comrades emerging from the shadows of memory. They spoke no words. They understood. Leading them was Sergeant Nora Tate, her left arm lost in that same campaign. Yet her gaze remained as sharp as ever, unbowed. They wore no uniform, yet their movements, their formation, their steady breaths, all bore the mark of soldiers. As Blackthorn closed in, the veterans held their ground. Titan surged forward, as if fueled by Ruth's very heartbeat. One mercenary fell when Titan pinned him, jaws at his throat, though he did not bite, only held as a living boundary between life and death. Nora, pistol firm in her one hand, signaled the counterattack. Those thought long forgotten by time now stood once more on the razor's edge of life and death, not for flag or country, but for a truth betrayed too long. Amid the firefight, Colonel Isaiah Powell was en route, not alone. From the Pentagon, he had sounded a dire alarm, and the FBI moved in with full authority. Armored vehicles rolled into Haven Ridge, sealing the perimeter. Blackthorn operatives were taken into custody, with no chance to retreat. But Hayes would not relent. He had lost too much to accept defeat at Ruth's hands. He appeared, no backup, no shield, only rage and entitlement, a pistol in hand and hatred in his voice. He advanced on Ruth as if his twisted past could overpower her. But Ruth stood her ground. She looked at him. No fury, no fear. Only the steady gaze of one who has lived long enough to know that justice is born not of power, but of perseverance. Hayes raised his gun. Titan exploded forward like a dark storm. Before Hayes could aim, the dog leapt, pinning him to the ground. A single strike, a cry of pain, and the FBI descended, snapping handcuffs on Hayes right in front of Ruth. He struggled. He raged about fame, influence, rank. But no one listened. This time, the roar of justice drowned out every lie. Marcus was rushed to the hospital that night. Nathan held his father's hand, tears falling silently. He did not know if Marcus would survive, but he knew, for the first time, his father had chosen rightly. Ruth and Nathan secured the evidence: files, recordings, data, and specimens. No longer mere testimony, but living proof of buried suffering. They would speak for those who no longer had a voice, and in that old wooden house, once the silent refuge of a forgotten woman, it now stood as the birthplace of reclaimed dignity for the wronged. Ruth did not cry. She simply sat beside Titan, stroking his head in a quiet benediction. The battle was over, but the truth, at last, had endured. The trial of Victor Hayes at the federal court in Atlanta was no ordinary legal proceeding. It became a symbol of forgotten memories, of betrayal carried out in the name of serving one's country, and of an ordinary woman who dared to stand up in the darkness. The day Ruth stepped into the courtroom, no one took their eyes off her, not because of her appearance, but because of the stillness in her gaze. There was no anger, nor pride, only the steadfast resolve of someone who had carried the weight of truth on her shoulders for nearly 2 decades. When she stood at the witness stand, her voice did not tremble. Each word, slow and clear, felt as if chiseled from cold stone, unyielding. She spoke of her days in the military, when loyalty was all she had. She spoke of her unit, the comrades who once stood beside her in the fire and fury, now reduced to only a handful of survivors. She recounted the fateful 2002 mission, when they discovered the first evidence of Project Nightshade, and she told of the silence the Army forced upon her, erasing her name from history as though she had never existed. Each of Ruth's testimonies struck like a dagger, not in shouts, not in climaxes, but enough to make the air in the courtroom grow heavy. Titan, her ever-present dog, was also allowed into the court, not as a witness, but as part of the story. Before the jury box, Titan executed each hand signal Ruth gave, precisely, with flawless reflexes. The sight brought the entire courtroom to silence. No one doubted that Ruth had once been one of the Army's finest canine specialists. Next, Claire took the stand. Young, yet her composure and presentation commanded attention. She produced detailed scientific data on the NX-17 toxin, the dangerous biological effects it caused, and the correlation with symptoms exhibited by veterans who had served in Ruth's unit. Not mere theory, those numbers and charts reflected real pain, the consequences no one wished to confront. Nathan, standing before the bench, spoke not with credentials or authority, but with conscience. He revealed the emails exchanged between Hayes and his own father, Sheriff Marcus Reed. The cold messages plotting to deal with Ruth and seize her land before an emergency excavation. The evidence was printed out, laid before the court, clear, undeniable. Then it was Marcus's turn. He sat in a wheelchair, his body still healing from that night's wound. Yet his eyes were different. Each word he uttered cut into his own pride, admitting every wrongful act, every misguided decision. He confessed to being manipulated by Hayes with promises of economic development and local glory. In return, he had watched justice be twisted under his own watch. His apology was addressed not only to Ruth, but to the community that once trusted him. Veterans from Ruth's unit filed forward to testify. No uniforms, no weapons, only the truths they had hidden for so many years. They spoke of symptoms, insomnia, neurological damage, infertility, paranoia. But what stunned the jury was not the list of ailments, but the way they spoke. Slowly, hesitantly, as though exhuming memories no one wanted to face. Each story, each pause, led to the same conclusion. They had been betrayed. The jury took only 3 hours to reach a verdict. Victor Hayes was convicted on 3 primary charges: treason, concealment of crimes, and causing grievous harm to civilians. When the sentence was read, he did not speak. He merely bowed his head, not from regret, but because his power had finally been stripped away. Immediately after the trial, the government was forced to declassify all records related to Project Nightshade. Documents once stamped top secret were made public. Those who had once doubted Ruth now read every line and every page with eyes of horror and remorse. Ruth received an official letter of apology from the Department of Defense, a lengthy document sealed in red, delivered to her address, no longer the eccentric old woman of Haven Ridge, but Captain Ruth Coleman in name and right. Her veterans received full restitution, not only medical compensation, but restoration of honor. Their names were reinstated in service records. They were no longer shadows drifting through the VA system. They were recognized. Haven Ridge, the town that once whispered rumors about the reclusive old woman, had become the epicenter of a new movement. Justice for abandoned veterans. People poured in. The press, politicians, veterans organizations, all seeking to understand why, in a small wooden house, one woman had bravely guarded the truth when no one else would. Ruth did not hold a press conference. She gave no remarks. She simply stood on her porch, Titan at her feet, watching the stream of people pass by. The clamor was no longer a threat. It was the denouement. A denouement that needed no gunfire, only a testimony, and a truth that could not be forgotten. 1 year later, Ruth's land became the Nightshade Memorial Park, dedicated to the project's victims. A stone monument, bearing the names of fallen and surviving soldiers, stood proudly among the flower beds Ruth once tended. Ruth moved into a small house nearby. She continued supporting veterans through a charity fund founded by Claire and Nathan. Titan, though aged, remained at her side. His eyes still gleamed with unwavering loyalty. Nathan, now an instructor at the police academy, taught professional ethics. Claire opened an environmental research center to prevent similar disasters. Marcus, after serving his sentence, volunteered at the park, seeking to make amends. One afternoon, Ruth sat on her porch, watching children from the school arrive to read names on the monument. Titan rested his head on her lap, breathing steadily. As dusk fell, the park lights illuminated, a reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will ultimately prevail. The story of Ruth Coleman and Titan is more than one woman's stand against a corrupt system. It is testament to the power of courage and loyalty. They changed Haven Ridge, and now their story inspires the world. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always exciting to see friends joining us from around the globe. Comment 1 if you enjoyed the story, so we can continue bringing you more great tales.